Haley was 6 years old, never slept on a bed. She's never slept on a bed. She's slept in the backseat of her mom's car. We're talking millions and millions, tens of millions of kids that aren't sleeping on their own bed. When the build was done and we went home, 2 days later, John, I got a call from that same daughter thanking me, and she says, I just want to let you know my mom passed away. Sleep in heavenly peace just rang so true. And the minute my wife said it, I knew exactly, okay, yep, that's it. That's what we want.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. For those of you who tune in to my voice because you heard me in a live seminar, whether that happened in my own backyard of St. Louis or somewhere around the country, or maybe even somewhere around the world, you know that we love to ask questions while we speak. And you know that one of the questions we ask near the end of the presentation is, what more can I do? And this question comes from the heartbeat of a guy named Jack Buck, who heard about a little boy who was dying, heard that the little boy was not going to survive. And rather than just say, that's a shame, he asked himself that evening, what more can I do? And that evening shows up to support, encourage, and love on a little dying boy named John O'Leary. And as he leaves that night, he's told that the little boy is going to die again. And rather than just chalking that up for, it's bad luck, I did my part, he asked the question, what more can I do? And the following day, this man came back into my life on day 2. And then he comes back on day 3 and comes back on day 4. And Jack Buck fundamentally and radically changed my life by asking and answering the question, what more can I do? And most of you hearing my voice or looking at my face right now, you know that story. But that question is one I think too often we passively ask and then we move on from, because he's in office or she's doing that, or my neighbor said it can't be done, or I'm too old, too poor, too rich, too young, too whatever, wrong side of the tracks, from too small of a town, too big of a city to make a difference. And then you hear the story of our guest today, and you recognize ordinary people, when they are animated with purpose and passion and audacious enough to take the next right step, can indeed not only change their world, but the world. And I'm blessed to bring forward to you today a story from a man who's done exactly that. From seemingly humble beginnings, has changed the world through his life. So my friends, I'm not going to tell you much about his story or his life. I'm going to let him do that work with us today. But I invite you right now on the front side of this conversation to put away the excuses, to shut off email, to turn off Fox or MSNBC or CNN. I want to make sure I offend everybody evenly today. Whatever your channel you're tuning into, it's the wrong channel today. Tune into the channel of individual accountability and agency to change the world for good. So without waiting any longer, let me loop him in. He is my friend and he's about to be yours. His name is Luke Mickelson. Luke, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thanks, John. Wow, it's great to be here. Thank you for that.
Yeah, dude, most of the time when I bring friends in, I ramble about their bio and I ramble about how much work they've done in that part of the world or this part of the world. And I think the beauty of our story today is, dude, it's not going to be me rambling, it's going to be you. And I just want to walk people down this line of where you came from, the work you've done, the impact you've had, and what you're doing today and how they can get involved. So let's start here. For people hearing the name Luke Mickelson for the very first time, if they were to meet you at a party in Idaho and you're sipping on water and they're sipping on beer and they say, Luke, brother, what do you do for a living? How do you respond to that?
Oh, first of all, it's a rager here in Idaho. Let me tell you that, John. We might be out fishing or hunting or doing something fun, but no, I appreciate that. You know, I'm an ordinary guy. I grew up in a very small town, 4,000 people in this town, and I'm just regular Joe. Being from a small town, if you could pick up a ball and throw it in any direction with some sort of accuracy, you kind of had to be forced to play sports. So, that's what I turned into. I was a sports guy, raised by a single mom who, I had 5 siblings, and we were just in a common house, and with a lot of love. Being raised by a single mom who's my hero, she taught me the joy of service. And I tell people, when you're a single mom with 3 sisters, I tell people I was the best dressed kid in town. But you also learn there's a lot of service to go around in a household like that. So when I get the privilege of telling people what I do, I mean, it's just an honor. And I remember a long time ago, my mission president, when I served a mission for my church, 20 plus years ago, he gave me some great advice. And he said, whatever you do in your life, whatever occupation you pursue, look at it as a way to serve others. I've done that. At least I try to do that every day, and it's so much easier now because that's what our world is. But to be able to pursue your dream like I am right now, and a passion that I didn't know I had that I discovered, and then do it for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just. John, it's just a dream come true. So I think I think the party we're at is a fun party.
So I'm gonna then walk you through the bio that you just shared because I want folks to recognize the impact you're having today and the humility, but the critical lessons and wisdom you learn as a kid, how they inform the way you show up today and the lives you're impacting today, tomorrow, and I think for eternity. So let's roll. You talked about a single mom. You talked about five siblings, a couple sisters. Just talk about your family of origin. Who were some of the big influences for you as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in a house without a dad, like a lot of people do. And because I was so, number one, in a small town, and number two was the athlete, I had a lot of dads. They were called coaches, friends' dads that I got to learn a lot of things from. So I knew when my parents got separated, I knew I was about, how old was I? 13. So just about a freshman in high school. And I remember thinking, John, I can use this as an excuse to get away with a lot of junk, right? I can do a lot of bad stuff. Or the only problem with that is I would know I was doing it. And so,
Yeah.
I think that was a good learning lesson to me to realize that, life's decisions and what I decide to do is going to affect me, and how critical that lesson is for me, going on, for anybody to go on in life, to realize that, what you do is has consequences, and what you do is valuable to others. So make them good. And I don't know, like being raised by a single mom, I saw the value of serving others. We were served. We had Christmas where there was no, I mean, my mom didn't make enough money to get presents for everybody. And one day we walked out, and in the mailbox there was $1,500,
Wow.
from friends, and so I owe that back to people. I feel I
Hmm.
owe that back for helping my mom out. I saw a lot of nights where, she cried and she was alone, and she, suffered. I remember one time I wanted to go to a quarterback football camp, right? It was $100. And back then, that was a lot of money. And I begged my mom. In fact, I remember getting mad at my mom that, I want to go to this and you can't. And she came down, handed me $100 bill, and she said, "This is the last money we have, but I want you to go on your football trip." And I mean, you can imagine, I just started crying, and there's no way I'm going to go. But she was great, and was my hero. So
I believe I read somewhere that you graduated with a class of 69 from your high school. And that's not
crazy.
just the private school in town, that is the school in
That
town.
is the school. That's right.
So this kid who played a little bit of quarterback, played a little bit of the backyard, played a little bit with his siblings, and gave a lot of thanks for his mom and the generosity of others. What was your dream as you graduated high school? What did you want to do as you grew up?
I ranged. I loved sports. Of course, I wanted to be a professional athlete, football or baseball. It's what I enjoyed. And then you get a little older and you realize, okay, maybe I maybe I have a plan B. And physical therapy. I felt I wanted to stay in the field of sports, if you will, but I also wanted to help people. And then when I graduated and went and served a mission, that's when I really found a joy of just communicating with people, right? Granted, when you're on your mission, you're talking about religion, and I served in Texas, the Bible Belt down there. I just had a great time just visiting with people and meeting people. And so when I came back, I had a great opportunity to start my career at a local water treatment company. And so when I had that opportunity and jumped in the world of sales and outside sales, I really found my niche. Not that I consider myself like this big salesman, but what I did do well, I felt, was just I love talking to people. I love to help solve problems for them, and be the guy that, hey, there's a problem, call Luke. He'll come down, we'll get it figured out. And so, yeah, that's just what I love to do.
So you did that for almost 2 decades. Not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about your sales job because really today we're here to talk about what led you out of that sales job. But before we do, earlier today, I had the opportunity of meeting your wife. Where did you meet your wife, and what was it about her outside of her beauty, man, that you fell in love with?
Oh, there's, well, this is a long topic because I could go on about my wife for a long time. She's just an incredible person. I actually met her a long time ago, and we reconnected. And immediately when I knew that she was interested in me, I mean, I was shocked, number one. And number two, it gave me value that I didn't think I had before. And And we just have, I kid you not, and I know a lot of people say this, John, but we just have the best life. My wife is a pillar of what womanhood should be. The most beautiful woman in the room for sure, and you would never know it. She's an example to me of someone that is a happy, positive person. I call her my Daisy because I literally think God put her on this world, on this earth, like He does flowers, so people can
Wow.
look and smile and see beauty. And that's just who my wife is. She'll brighten your day the minute you meet her. So
Dude, there are a lot of people driving with their spouse right now who are being punched by their spouse saying, "Why don't you talk about me like this dude talks about his wife?" My wife being one of them. And
she's
I
great.
years
Yeah.
ago, I collected a bunch of love letters from her friends about what they love most about my wife. And what they collectively said, these are the primarily ladies, but the people who knew her best. And they said, we love best humility. And I think what a beautiful feminine and masculine trait. This idea of knowing you're enough and not pretending like you're more than you are, or trying to become something that you're not, but just being beautiful as a daisy radiates, the beauty of spring, man. So I like your analogy a lot. The reason why I wanted to bring up your wife is because you're going to need her, yes, not only for marriage and the life you share today, but to shift from one business into another. So let's speed the tape up now to 2012. All right. So you get an opportunity of learning with a bunch of other guys up in your church that there's a need in your community for what exactly?
Yeah, so in 2012, it was an interesting time in my life. I tell people or hear people talk about going through a midlife crisis, and I mean, I don't even know what that. I mean, I think I know what that means. I think that's different from everybody, right? But for me personally, I tell people my life on paper was great. I had a good job. I was on the docket to buy the company, so career-wise, I was set. I served in my church in a position called young men's president, which for those in the South, I tell people it's kind of like a youth pastor, but I don't consider myself a pastor. I was a coach, so they're like, "Oh, you like to work with the kids and have fun with the kids? Yeah, we're going to put you as young men's president." So and that really was my responsibility was the spiritual growth and the physical activity of the young men's program, which is ages 12 to 18 or so. And the activity arm of the church at the time was Boy Scouts. So, every Wednesday night we'd have our Boy Scout meetings and being the young men's president, I was kind of the leader over the leaders, right? So I didn't necessarily work directly with the boys all the time, but I sat in a lot of the church leadership meetings where we talked about the community, the things that needed. Then we talked about the families that the church was helping at the time. And I remember sitting in this meeting, granted they're Sunday morning, so trying to stay awake. But I remember someone talked about this family where we were helping. The father suffered from some mental health issues. The mom was the local school bus driver. They had a
Right.
bunch of kids and they were helping them with food, and the kids didn't have any beds and helped their rides to school. And I was like, wait a minute. Did you just say this? The kids don't have any beds? What do you mean by that? Right? I'd never heard of that before. And when they talked about they visited the home and they literally are just sleeping on the floor. I don't know, like it just hit me like a two by four. I just thought, and I instantly thought of my own kids going, my gosh, like I've slept on the floor before once on my mission or out camping, and it's not fun. And it's certainly
No.
not fun if you're doing it every single day. And then the other thought came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity that I can take these young men, these Boy Scouts, get them out from behind a screen. Let's put a drill and a sander in their hands rather than an Xbox controller, and let's teach them something. Right? It's a good activity." And so that night after that meeting, I was so excited. We headed home and I ran downstairs and started measuring my daughter's bunk bed. She had this bunk bed that we'd bought a long time ago, and knowing that hey, I'm going to have the Boy Scouts help me with this. I gotta dumb this down pretty good. So, I wasn't unfamiliar with tools. I knew my way around a drill and a saw, but I'd never built furniture before. And I thought, well, we'll figure this out, right? We'll learn how to do this. And so that's what we did. The boys came over and for that week, we started building this. And I'll tell you this, one thing I noticed right off the bat, because I was really nervous, this is going to be a fun activity, right? I wanted these
Okay.
boys to enjoy it. And being nervous that it wasn't a screen or a sport that we were playing, it was actual hard work. I saw smiles on their faces.
Yeah.
And John, I can't help but think this isn't fun work, but the smiles came from the fact that these young men, these kids knew what this bed was going to. And And of course, now that we've done hundreds of thousands of beds and hundreds of thousands of volunteers with the same smiles, you look at it and you're like, yes, that is what I saw 13 years ago, in a 12, 13-year-old kid who had better things, I'm sure, in his mind to do, but he came in a cold, wintry, snow outside garage, which, not a hot garage is freezing. And he spent a couple hours a night building a bed for a child that didn't have one, and the
Yeah.
smiles showed it. And so it was such a great experience to see these boys enjoy that. And so now, kind of this funny story is when the time came to deliver the bed, I had to stay back and clean my garage. It was a mess. So I didn't get to go on the delivery, but the next day at church, I heard all the story. The parents went, the other leaders went, and they just told us
Right.
this amazing story of these kids and how they reacted to this new bed, the bed that they didn't have. And I got pretty jealous, And I remember coming home from church that day, and again, keep in mind all of this kind of midlife crisis of who am I? What am I supposed to
Yes.
be doing? Is this the job I'm supposed to be in? Is this the faith, the religion I should be in? What do I follow? What does God want for me? I mean, I just had this big hole, I call it, just tearing me apart, and trying to find happiness where I could find happiness. And really, what I tell people, it was I had bits and pieces of passion that I was getting from both work and service where I could, but it just wasn't feeling this emptiness in my heart and my soul until I built that bed. And for whatever reason, John, I'm not a carpenter. I didn't wake up in this life thinking, hey, I'm going to go and build furniture for kids.
Right.
It was something that hit me like a two by four. It was a need. And then when I went, so let me back up a little bit. So here in my house after this meeting, I had all these things going through my mind, a commercial comes up. I'm sitting on the couch with my kids, and a commercial comes on the TV. And it was just another Xbox game, right? And I could read my kids' minds of what they're saying. We're a couple weeks before Christmas, and I know they're gonna ask me for this freaking game. And I'm like, you got enough games for Xbox. We're not buying another Xbox game. And I know it just hit me. Here, I just delivered a bed to some kids, or built a bed rather, to some kids that didn't have one. And I want my kids to feel the joy of service. I want them to
Right.
appreciate what they have, you know, and learn how to give back to the community, give back to other people. And so I remember it was a what I call my tiny moment, right? And we all have them where we're sitting on the couch and you have this little moment that pops in your head, this little thought of how I need to do this, or this person needs this help, or
Right.
and too often, John, we let those thoughts just fleet away, right? I remember in your introduction, you hit the nail on the head. There's so many reasons why we don't do these tiny moments. I'm too busy. I gotta wake up in the morning. I gotta go to bed early. I've gotta, I've got works piling up. I'm too stressed, and those all these reasons, right? And I face the same thing, right? I'm sitting on this couch, 2 inches from the ground, and it was the longest 2 inches ever. Just going, I wish my kids would appreciate this. I wish they would do this. I wish, I could have shared that example or shared that activity with them. And then it dawns on me, well, I got leftover wood and I'm 2 inches from the ground. So I jumped up off the couch, started walking to the garage. Everybody's like, Dad, where are you going? And I said, you know what? I'm going to go in the garage and I'm going to build another bed, and you're coming with me to help. And we had the
Hmm.
greatest time building this bed, John. It was just super fun.
Just like you and the boys.
I had an older boy who was about, let's see, Riley was probably 9, 10. My daughter was 6, and then I had a 1-year-old. So it was really, really just me and the kids out there swinging screws and sanders around, and just had the greatest time. And then we had some other friends come in, but really what changed was now I had this bed, this bug bed we created. I had no idea what to do with it. Like I wanted the activity for my kids and
Right.
and us to do. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know what to do with this bed. Like I
The,
don't know
the
what
wild
you
thing is when I first heard your story and heard that you were able to secure a bed, make the bed, and deliver the bed for one person, my thought would have been, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Like we got the one person
Yeah.
in our town that was bedless, and we took care of them. And then you find out in making this bed and then putting it out there into the world, man, hey, we got another bed. Is there any need?
Yeah.
that there was indeed need. Tell me the story about Haley.
So, and that you're exactly right. So, here I am not knowing that the child bedlessness, not a real word, but a real problem. I mean, a real problem even existed. Someone recommended, hey, why don't you post on, some buy sell trade site on Facebook, a group, what you want to do. And I said, okay, I was a little leery about that. When you put a free bet on one of those sites, you're probably going to get hit up by everybody. And that's what I did. I just said, hey, we built this bed for a child in need. It's a Christmas present from our family to theirs. Can someone help me find a child? And although we did get some people that, a lot of people want a free bed. What was astonishing to me, though, was how many people in my community said, Luke, how can I help? That sounds great. Can I
Yeah.
bring a pillow? Can I bring a mattress? Can I bring some toys, some food? All this stuff came flooding in. And I thought, holy cow, like there's a huge community. So I learned two things. I learned that, hey, there are some kids in my community that didn't have beds. And I had a community that really wanted to help. And
Mm.
then so here I finally got this message from a friend of mine. She actually served a mission in the same mission I did, and she says, Luke, I've been working with this family. We just got them a house, little Haley. So I call it my Haley story. We showed up to Haley's house. We decided this is the family we're going to give my family's bunk bed to, right? That we built. Walked into this home, John, and I don't know. I've seen poverty before. I've seen homelessness or transitioning homeless before, but I never looked at it through the eyes of a 6 year old. And that's who Haley was. 6 years old, never slept on a bed. She's never slept on a bed. She's slept in the backseat of her mom's car. They were homeless. 6 years old, and you wouldn't know it. This little girl was so happy. Granted, she now finally has a bedroom, right? Well, there's no bed in it, so it's just a room. And she pulls us back in this room, and we're looking. I'm looking at this room, going, okay, there's tears in the carpet and holes in the wall, and the closet's full of used toys. And that's it. There wasn't any furniture, well, anywhere in the house. There was a hot plate sitting on a milk carton, or a milk carton sitting on a hot plate, vice versa, with a can of soup on it. And that was it. And then Haley's room, yeah, you can imagine what it looks like. But what caught me the most is I walked in a room, in the corner was a pile of clothes, and that's where she slept. So Haley would come home from school, she would take her school clothes off, put her pajamas on, sleep on her school clothes, and then wake up and put them on and go to
Do it
school.
again.
And that was her life. And something inside of me, I just went, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is how this child, we have kids in this country, in my own community, which is not a necessarily a poor community, in my own community, sleeping in these conditions. You got to be kidding me. And so I got filled with a lot of excitement, especially as we started bringing in these pieces of the bed and started putting together. You could see Haley was just kind of trying to figure this out, right? Once she realized, John, what we had, she erupted. I mean, she just started hugging us and hugging the bed. She even started kissing the bed. And I tell people, I've never seen a child kiss a bed before. I mean, I never did. And so if that was enough, then, and this really got me, I looked up, and here's this mom, 6 years, working, trying to find a way to provide for her daughter. I'm sure, like my mom, countless nights of, tears and frustration and worry and, guilt and all this stuff just pouring down her face, all in relief. And I just knew right then, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is more than just a good night's sleep for a child. This is a need here. And we had about a half hour ride home, me and
Mm.
my friend Jordan. And as we drove home, we didn't really say much to each other, if anything at all, because I was just so overcome with what we just experienced. Finally, when we got home, I just remember, almost with a little anger, I was like, you know what? No kid is going to sleep on the floor in my town if I have anything to do with it. And I'm from a small town, so I didn't know that there was those were infamous words, because now my small town turns out to be, there's 3% or greater of the population represents child bedlessness. We're talking millions and millions, tens of millions of kids that aren't sleeping on their own bed. And so that's how SHP was born, is out of a need that we found in our community, that I found in my community, that I wanted to solve. And so we just started building beds.
Man, I'm glad you kept talking after you shared the story of Haley and then her mom and her tears and that joyful pride of life is broken, it's hard, but this little girl's gonna have a soft, warm place to sleep tonight. Like that's a powerful deal. Many of us would leave a deal like that, go home, high five anybody who we could share that story with, high five Jordan, high five our wife, tell our kids we did something great, and then go out to Popeyes for dinner. And then
Yeah.
go back to work the following day. The differentiator in your story, there's so many things that you did that I and so many others probably would not, man, including make the bed for Haley, find the place to drop it off, make the difference. But then what you do next is in so many ways even more radical. You decide to do it again and then again and then again. So take us through what allows you to do, let your Boy Scouts to do it for one, you and your family do it for another. But then you, Jordan, and a couple other guys do it for a third, and then a fourth, and then beyond. What is that mindset that challenges you to not be okay feeling good about ourselves? Like there's
You
an
know,
opportunity to elevate.
yeah, I know what you mean. And the simple answer, John, is, I don't know. I mean, I've done service projects before. I've sat and said the same things. We built wheelchair ramps and
Right.
we've painted bleacher. I mean, everything these Boy Scout projects have done. And I've done the same thing. Walk home after the activity. Yeah, that was cool. Now
Totally.
let's go to grab some ice cream, whatever. And never gave it two thoughts. But when I saw little Haley and when I saw that mom, something changed. I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you how to find it. I just am lucky I found it. And I've given a lot of talks. My TED talk was about passion and purpose, which by the way was not a very good talk.
We got to agree to disagree, man.
Oh, you're so nice. TED
One of the
Talk
things that
platform
brought us
is not
together.
my TED Talk platform is not my platform I like to speak on. But I was just it just filled the vacancy in my soul. It brought joy to me that I've been searching for. And the funny thing is like, yeah, I'm from Idaho. I'm a hunter. I'm a fisherman. I was a college football buff that, Saturdays were filled up with all these activities. And in one instant, I mean, in a snap of a finger, John, none of those things really mattered anymore to me.
Wow.
It was the weirdest thing. I'd like to give you a reason why I can't, other than I came home that night and I said, no kid's gonna sleep on the floor of my town. And
Yeah.
from that moment on, we built another 21 beds that holiday season, delivered them all before Christmas, spent all our money, doing that. And it literally changed my life. It changed my outlook on how I viewed success, how I measured success. It was no longer about how many cells or how much zeros were behind my paycheck. It really became, how can I now serve my fellow man? I'm a
That
human and I want to help these little humans out because they need it. And the more I looked into this problem, and certainly there's someone solving this somewhere, and I found out no. I found one charity in the entire country back in 2012 that was helping kids build beds, and that was it. And so it just sparked something inside of me that I'm just grateful it did, and it brought passion to me. And I tell people that came from a tiny moment. These tiny moments we dismiss, we excuse away. Those, you just never know what can transpire from taking action on these tiny moments.
well, you mentioned something as you move toward the tiny moments piece that you no longer cared how many zeros were in that paycheck, which is both a blessing and at first a curse, man. So you've had an 18-year long career. You are deeply successful. You're driving the right car. You're wearing the right shirt. You got the right look. You got the right home. You've got success, but you're missing something.
Yeah.
And so you're filling this with the work you're doing in these beds and deliver them for kids and their families. But it becomes such a part-time job that it almost takes over your full-time life. And so your business approaches you and they basically put in front of you, man, ultimately you got to make a choice here. Which lane do you want to operate in?
Yeah.
One of the cool things about you is so many guys make their decision and they move forward and then they tell their spouse about it. And you huddled with her and you said, here's the opportunity, here's the challenge. What should we do? Would you
Yeah.
talk about that?
Yeah, you bet. We've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and the scale of it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it came from the fact that the more we delivered beds and the more we showed the public what we are doing, the more applications and the more that we unearthed or uncovered this need called child bedlessness. And it just fueled more of the fire of what I wanted to do. Because when you save one child by bringing them a bed and you see this little kid as you walk in turn from, apprehension for the stranger in his room to appreciation
Yeah.
to just pure joy. It's addicting, it's fulfilling, and I wanted that all the time. I wasn't getting that at work. I wasn't getting that at church per se. And my wife, my family, my friends, they all knew it. Even my boss, who actually was my stepdad, right? I worked for it was a family business, which made this a little more complicated. And I remember, I was vice president of sales. I had 7 or 8 salesmen underneath me. We were a small regional company. We were growing. And you're absolutely right. This became such a passion for mine. I didn't miss work or anything like that, but every vacation I took was for SHP. Every evening that was open was for SHP, and that says a lot to my family who backed me through all this as well. So when the time came and it needed to come, my dad was smart enough to realize, okay, Luke is a different person. And I think either needs to be focused on his work or he needs to go and pursue this charity. And I'm grateful for him to give me the boost, the confidence to say, you know what, go for it. And it wasn't an easy decision to go from zero money, or to have a career to zero money, but I knew how to do it. And so, yeah, we decided it was a hard decision, but also the decision was already made for me.
Yeah.
I had no choice per se in my own mind. I knew what I wanted to do. I couldn't stick around and again live this life of this hole in my heart. I had to go for it, and so we did. And I quit my job, prayed that we would find something else, and we did for a little while, which was really nice. I made like half as much money, but I was never happier. We built beds all the time and just had a great time.
In a moment, I want to ask you about scaling that because, you got nice big Idaho hands, man. You can build out some beds, and I'm grateful for that. But you scaled this thing in a way that in 2012 and 2018, when you pivoted over to it full time, I'm sure you never imagined. So we'll get there next. But before we do, you mentioned SHP a couple times. What's the anagram? What does that actually represent? And how did you come up with the title?
This is a funny story, actually. So back when we delivered that first bed to Haley and we came back and started building more beds, I remember our wife's like, well, because we were posting on Facebook, hey, we're building beds, come help build and come help deliver and all this stuff. And she's like, well, you got to call this something. And I said, don't worry, babe. I got the best name, Beds for Babes. John, terrible idea.
Yeah.
My wife looked at me and she says, are you kidding me right now? And I'm like, what's wrong with that? She's like, think about that Google search. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's probably not a better. So Beds for Babes was out. And it was
Way bad.
yeah, being Christmas time, we had that on our minds. Silent Night is one of my favorite, if not, well, now definitely my favorite Christmas carol. And to think of someone sleeping in heavenly peace, it just is exactly what we wanted people and wanted these kids to do, And then, of course, you think about, the first child, the one child that didn't have a bed and who that song's about, it brought more meaning to it, right? And so sleep in heavenly peace just rang so true. And the minute my wife said it, I knew exactly, okay, yep, that's it. That's what we want. And so, yeah, so Sleep in Heavenly Peace was born, or SHP as we call it short. And it really means a lot. It means that these kids, it has a little bit of let's just call it a religious feel behind it. These kids know that they're going to sleep in peace, just like these angels do, just like, Christ did back in the manger time. And we wanted those kids to feel that as they slept on their new bed.
Thank you. What a great, appropriate, perfect name for the business and the
Thanks.
impact and the
Yeah, my
mission.
first selection was terrible.
Yeah, I'm glad you married up. So did I. So let's move on. You met a guy named Mike Rowe, and maybe as much as any other interaction, that conversation and then the impact of that conversation elevated where this organization went next.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about scaling from building beds in your garage to conversations with others to recognizing homelessness is a real issue we face everywhere, but so is bedlessness.
Yeah.
In every
Yeah.
community, we're dealing with it, and we can fight it in every community, but not by ourselves. We get to
Correct.
do this. Mike
It
helps
was
you do this. Talk about scaling up.
You bet. Yeah. It was very organic at first. In 2012, 13, and 14, we just built beds. Well, let me back up. In 2012, we built beds in my garage. 2013, my friend from Jordan that came down and did the delivery with me, he came down and helped me build beds. He's like, you know what? I want to do this in Boise. I'm like, sweet. I'll bring the tools up one weekend in around Christmas time. We'll build beds, deliver them, blah, blah, blah. So we put on what we called the Boise chapter, right? Whatever that meant. So because we weren't a nonprofit at the time, right? We were just
Yeah.
this two friends. Well, we had a bunch of friends that were helping, but me and Jordan, he did Boise, I did Twin Falls. We just and we built one time a year. Well, in 2015, well, 2014, we became a nonprofit because we couldn't finance it ourselves. And I have a funny story. It's a good story. I remember in 2014, we just became a nonprofit. We were talking about this Christmas build we were having. We were building it up. It was the middle of summer, right? Jordan and I were at lunch, and I remember this lady came around as we sat at our booth. She came around, stood at the edge of our booth, and she says, I'm sorry, I just listened to your whole conversation because we were talking about this build that we were going to do. And she's like, I think what you're doing is fabulous. Here's all the money in my wallet. And I mean, we kind of looked at each other going, there's a complete stranger. And and that's John when I realized, okay, this is people are being impacted by this just
Yes.
like I am, or just like I was and still am. And the more we shared, the more we unearthed the problem. And the more we shared, the more people across friends of ours that lived either across town or even other parts of the country, other states said, hey, how can we do this? And
Yeah.
so we kind of helped them figure out how to do this, set up these quote, quote chapters now. But it was in 2008 as well, the end of 2017 is when things really shifted for SHP and for me. That's when I had 2 days left of my vacation for work because I was still working for my stepdad. And I remember Jordan came to me and he says, "Hey, listen, we you got to take 2 days off in November." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I can't tell you why, but you got to take the 13th and 14th off in November." And all I asked him was like, "Does this have to do with sleep in heavenly peace?" And he says, "Yes." And I remember thinking, this is going to be a challenge because I got to go to my boss and say, "Listen, I need these 2 days off," and I know he's going to ask me why, and it's going to be one of those decisions that we've got to make. And sure enough, it was. I said, "Hey, I've got to take these 2 days off," and he says, it's about time you need to decide what you want to do here." And so we went into these 2 days of vacation. I had to quit my job, so now I had all the time in the world, but I had no idea what Jordan meant. It essentially cost me my job, but I knew it was something big for SHP. And what I was told was this was just some random New York magazine that wants to do an article about this guy in Idaho building beds. And I'm like, cool, we got people flying in. What was shocking to me was how many people flew in. They flew
Yeah.
in, there was like 10 people that flew in. They had cameras, they had, microphones, they had all these things. And I was like, I remember thinking, holy cow, like this is a big production. This is a big thing, right? And I had no idea Dirty Jobs Micro was behind this whole thing. They're interviewing me, they're talking to, I'm telling them the story about SHP, blah, blah, blah. And we set up, Jordan had this build. It was a training build because at the time we had about 7 chapters in various states. They all flew in and we were going to have this big training seminar with these 7 chapters. Well, what I didn't know was they had planned all of this for Mike Rowe to show up. And so when we were in the middle of this build doing this training seminar, a lot of people didn't know how to build beds. It was just me and Jordan and a few others. Well, I get this tap on my shoulder while the cameras are going and stuff. And I turn around and there's Mike Rowe. I mean, can you imagine, turning around and there's this huge celebrity you love. And I went, Mike Rowe, what are you doing here? Right. Then, I mean, thoughts, my mind went a million miles an hour. And I started putting this together going, okay, yeah, I see what happened here. So yeah. And Mike Rowe was there doing his Facebook watch series called Returning the Favor. And we were episode 9 on season 2. And what that show and what if you haven't seen the show, it's basically Mike Rowe went around, found what he called do-gooders in the community, broadcast what they did, and then they gave them something that at the end of the show
Yeah.
that that organization needed. Well, we were in desperate need of a warehouse. I mean, we had finally found this one little kind of rundown warehouse by this great family that let me use it for free. Well, they got us a warehouse, a really nice, big warehouse for 4 years. What that show did for us, John, was it was a megaphone.
Yeah.
We were viewed by 10 million people. And from there, we went from the 7 chapters we had over the last, 5 or 6 years to 125 chapters in the first year to now where we're at is we've trained over 400 chapters. We're in 4 countries and we've built almost 300,000 beds.
Where to go next, man? I mean, part of it is just the audacity of a kid with a single mom, 5 siblings to say yes to one kid, and then yes to one more, and then yes to one more. But then ultimately, this idea of saying yes to utilizing people bigger and broader than me, which is a really hard thing to do. And you did. And now, because of your yeses, 300,000 kids are sleeping in heavenly peace. And it's just the start of it, man. You mentioned around the country, 4 countries around the world. I think you've got a goal of almost 90,000 beds this year coming up.
That's right. That's right. And the thing is what I learned was number one, I'm not going to reach all these kids. This guy in Idaho is not going to reach all these kids. It needs to be done on a community level.
Right.
And we solved 2 problems, right? First problem, obviously, child bedlessness. Didn't know it was a real thing. We know now. But what I also learned was there was millions and millions of people out there, great members of the community. They want to give back, John. They just don't know how,
That's right.
right? And we live in this society where we see on social media and news how divided we are and how terrible, the conditions of our country. And you know what? I disagree. We
Me too.
I deal with, and so do you. I'm sure we live in this world of amazing people that, you know what? I don't care what you believe or your political stance. I'm here to help humans help being humans. And that's a motto I live by is I'm a human helping a human. And these are little humans that we're helping. My gosh. And these kids are in these circumstances most of the time, 99% of the time, not because of their choices. They're
Yeah.
there for someone else's either good or bad choices, whatever. They're there suffering for someone else's decisions. And if we can come in and we can provide a little bit of ease, a little bit of leg up, if you will, for these kids, and it only takes a couple hours to build some beds, what better use of our time? I mean, my gosh, to give these kids a place to sleep for years and years.
Yeah.
I mean, I have kids that are still sleeping on the same bed we delivered 10 years ago, right? What a great opportunity to as a community to come together with your local Sleep and Heavenly Peace chapter, build beds, deliver it, and be a part of something that is real, something that is pure and simple, but so impactful and provides so much need for families and children in your community. We say it's a community event because it needs to be solved by the community.
Luke, when you hear a number like 300,000, there are 300,000 stories of little Haleys
Yeah.
hopping up from the floor for the very first time, sleeping on a mattress for the very first time, and covering themselves up with a warm blanket in some
Yeah.
cases for the very first time. Those stories are magnificent, and you've got them at scale. Would you share, as we get ready to move toward the finish line together, one story of one of your volunteers? Whether they're an executive director over one of the chapters, someone who showed up to, they didn't even know why they were coming,
Yeah.
but they put on some work gloves, they hammered together a bed, they helped deliver it, they drove the truck, whatever it was. One story of impact from someone on the service side that shows that the impact's not just on the receiving, but on the giving.
Oh, there's a lot of them, but I'll show you one of my favorite ones. We had a build here at a hospital locally, and and I tried. This is 10 years ago. This is a while ago, and I tried to visit all the builds that were happening. It's impossible now. There's thousands of them, but I remember sitting at this build, and right in the middle of, you got to understand, we take raw lumber and just cut 2x4s, and we go from there to a finished product, right? With saws and tools and all sorts of stuff. And there's 60, 70, 200 people there, right? So as a chapter president and someone that knows how to do this process, you're getting pulled left and right all day long, right? Well, I remember in the middle of this chaos of coordinating these volunteers, I get this tap on my shoulder and I turn around and here's this young lady. She's 35 or so. And she says, Luke, if you have a minute, I want to introduce you to my mom. I said, oh, great. I would love to. She says, but before we do this, let me tell you a little story. So her mom, been married to her husband for years, decades, had just passed away a few years before this. Well, it was so traumatic, this passing of this spouse, of her dad, that her mom never left the house. but she was so paranoid. So she never left the house. And you're talking, think about a grandma not leaving the house. I mean, there's baptisms and church
Yes.
activities and school, all sorts of, she was too afraid to leave. And I'm like, and she's here? She says, yes. She saw on the news that this event for the community building beds for kids that didn't have beds. She says, I was just sitting at home. All of a sudden, I get this call, and my mom, and if you think about this for me, my mom says, I want to go to this event. I mean, she says, my jaw dropped. You want to leave the house. So I was super excited to run over and meet this lady. And she was in a wheelchair and, she really didn't do much as far as physical stuff, but her presence was so impactful. She handed me this envelope and it was, it was a little donation. She says, I heard about what you're doing. I heard about the community and how they're helping kids. I had no idea this was a need. Here's money for a bed. I hope it can help. And I mean, tears in my eyes. I just was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. Number one, we're going to get a kid a bed from your donation. Thank you so much. It was a neat experience. Well, when the build was done and we went home, 2 days later, John, I got a call from that same daughter thanking me. And she says, I just want to let you know my mom passed away. I went, you got to So one of her last passions that she had was to help a child get a bed. And she
Mm.
got to be a part of that because her community helped. Her community wanted to be a part of it. And that is the passion that gets riled up. It gets burning inside of people. And I'm not talking just for sleeping on the peace, just for building beds. Passion is the key to find this success and meaning in life. This elderly lady showed so much compassion, so much passion, so much care that she overcame. And I'm sure that was a very traumatic experience for her. She overcame a fear that otherwise was keeping her locked in her house. That was just such an inspirational moment for me. I've never forgot it.
I won't either. And neither will our audience paying attention to our conversation as we get ready to move into what we call the Live Inspired 7. Luke, how can those of us who've been inspired by this conversation learn more about your work and how they can do likewise? The cool thing about this is it ain't hard to get involved.
Right.
So how do we get involved with the work you're doing?
Absolutely. You can go to our website. The first thing to do is go to shpbeds.org. That's, sleep in heavenly peace, shpbeds.org. And when you bring up that website, we've got it arranged to where it brings up the closest chapter to you. It brings up their main page. So you're going to see how many kids are asking for beds, how many beds they've delivered. There's a little toggle on there that shows how many beds nationwide we deliver, blah, blah, blah. But there's spots in there that you can click on. The first thing that I'd ask your listeners to do right now is just share the message, share the word, share the awareness that child bedlessness is a real thing. There is still zero statistics on how many kids don't have beds in our country. I mean, we talk about coats and toys and shelter and food, but there's no statistics whatsoever other than what Sleep in Emily Peace has come up with, which is greater than 3% of the total population. So raising awareness, telling people that, hey, if you know of a kid that doesn't have a bed, go to shpbeds.org and apply. Number two is you can volunteer. You can find a local chapter closest to you if there is one, and they're always looking for key core, what we call core team volunteers that can
Right.
show up once a week, once a month, help out with the build, help out deliveries. I promise you, it will change your life. It's one of those things
Right.
where when rubber meets the road, man, that's when things happen and that's when things move. I tell people you can listen, you can even watch stories, videos of kids getting beds. It is nothing like being in the room yourself. It's nothing like seeing this child scared, hiding behind mom, and then you build a bed for them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're asleep before you leave. I mean, that's the impact we make. And of course, donations. I like to share this because I'm a farm kid from Idaho, John. I didn't want to start a charity that people just donated money to. It went up the pie in the sky. You had no idea where. No, I wanted to be as transparent. Number one, transparent as possible. But I also wanted the impact that people want to give need to impact their community. So when you go and you donate money, you can pick whichever chapter you want to donate money to. 90% 90 cents of that dollar is going to stay in that chapter. We have to finance SHP. So of course, 10%, we pull 10%. That's a tithe, right? It's really where I got it. And so that's how we manage it. But donations, obviously, as a nonprofit, that's how we run, that's how we organize, that's how we build,
Right.
and in-kind donations as well. So really raising awareness, becoming a volunteer, donating. And if you happen to find that there's no chapter closest to you, this is something that rings true to your heart, we make starting a chapter extremely easy. Now, it's work, right? You almost run your little business here, but we have a training program that walks people through how to start a chapter, how to run successful chapters, and we have a whole team behind. We won't let people fail. We want to make sure that every kid has an opportunity to get a bed. And so if you don't have a chapter near you and you want to start one, you can go to shpbeds.org and learn what that process looks like.
Well, man, I'll be going there and I'm going to be bringing my friends with me and I'm going to be making a donation and I'm going to be getting my hands dirty. I think I have fit far too few splinters in my hands. And I think I'm not the only one with hands. Mine might be different than yours, but I have hands that I can use to make a difference for a child. So I beg and I implore and I challenge our audience. Hey, this is nice. Good for Luke. I'm glad he's doing his thing up in Idaho. But the real piece in the story, if you're paying attention to it, is do your part too. Do your
Yes.
part too. So, my friends, as you all know, and now Luke's about to find out, we have 7 questions that tether every one of our guests together. They're called the Live Inspired 7. So, Luke, here we go, man. What's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Ooh. Well, I'd say the scriptures back in the day that I spent a lot of time in the scriptures because it gave me a compass through my teenage years to trust and to rely on someone bigger than myself. So that's probably a common one, I know. But for
We
me,
hear
it
it a
really,
bunch. When I hear it, I always ask, okay, that's a big book. I'm not sure I can twist anyone's arm to read it all right now. Bet I can get them to look at one part of it. So is there a book within that larger book that you would say, man, go here first?
that's great. I'd say it's Luke, but no,
It's always self-serving with Luke Mickelson. It's always
exactly.
about
Sorry,
him.
guys. No,
Let's
really.
start with Luke. Sleep in heavenly peace as you begin with Luke.
There you
What's
go.
one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little kid and wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Wow. I feel like my drive for competition has led me to my drive for service.
Mm.
And I think service is the key to happiness, not in everything, but in a lot of ways. I tell people, look, if you want true joy, you got to stop looking at yourself and you got to
Right.
see how you can serve others. And I'm not saying your problems go away. Of course not. But what I am saying is they just don't seem as heavy,
Mm.
and so, we sit here and we live in this world of bills and work and kids and all sorts of stuff that weigh down on us. They don't go away. But I promise you, in my case, you deliver bed to a child that didn't have one. There's a lot of lessons and a lot of gratitude that come from that experience. And so when you go home and you realize, my coworker offended me, or someone at church did this, or my neighbors across the street didn't do that, boy, it really doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't seem as heavy.
If your home caught fire and your kids and your bride and any animals you may have are all out of the front yard safe, and you have an opportunity running back in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you would grab, Luke?
I sit in my office as I look around and see all the things that I've been a part of and the awards that I've been given and things of that nature. I'd have to say, as I look, there's a friend of mine posted that very first post on Facebook that I did to that buy sell trade site. He printed out and he actually printed all the comments that surround it. I've got that framed. I'd pick that out probably hands down over everything because that is the one post and the one moment that has got me here. And I would never want to forget that.
300 plus thousand beds began with a crazy post on Facebook saying, hey guys, I got this thing in my garage. Anybody need one? That is an amazing gift
Hmm.
that you model in your life, but also that your friends celebrated. Hey man, the little things can lead to mighty, mighty return. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous Idaho fall days with anybody, living or dead, and have a long conversation with that person, who do you want right next to you, Luke?
For a lot of different reasons, certain people, but my grandpa Mickelson was someone I only knew when I was really young, but was a pillar of a small community in Idaho. And I've always felt like I was a lot like him. I didn't get to know him very well. He passed away before I was old enough to really enjoy who he was. But I would love to get to know my grandpa better. I would love to sit and reminisce and chat. He was a guy, farmer from Idaho, one of these guys that 3 o'clock in the morning, cow got out and the neighbors, he was the guy you called. He just was. And he would get up and go. And I also remembered he was a very strong guy. I remember he'd flex his muscle
Yeah.
and we were all so astonished his bicep was so big. And I don't know why I always remembered that. He was just
Man,
a
I
guy
spoke
that
at a conference in Idaho for farmers in November, I think. And a guy who was 86 came up to me and shook my hand and almost broke me. There's something about an Idaho or
Right.
really any farmer
Yeah.
and in doing the work from a young age
Yeah.
into their teens,
Yeah.
20s for a life. Farmers don't retire.
No,
When the cow
no.
gets out, you better go get it. And if it's neighbors, you better go help.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
when I feel depleted about our nation, I turn off Fox. Sorry, friends. I turn off MSNBC. Sorry, friends over there. I turn off CNN. Sorry, guys. And I look at the folks who are actually doing the work, and some who are doing it better than most are farmers, man. So your neighbors, and I appreciate your granddaddy. I appreciate his grandson, and I appreciate those who are growing up our nation. So let's move on to what's been the best advice your granddaddy or anybody else ever gave you. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, like I said, my mission president, who was again another father figure of mine, took me under my wing when I was on my mission. Kind of the hierarchy of the mission. There's you can become, or the mission president had assistants to the missionaries. Well, I became one of his assistants, and I to this day am so grateful I got that blessing, that calling, if you will, to help him, because I got to know him as a man and one of the most humble human beings I've ever met, his advice, and I share that with everybody. If you can look at your work, and whether it's church work or career work or dad work or brother work or what,
Yeah.
if you can look at your work as a way to serve others, it's going to go a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable than punching a time card, And so that's been the greatest advice. I've enjoyed that because again, service really is where a lot of true joy can come. And when you can look at, whether you're an electrician, a plumber, or janitor, whatever you are, if you can look at, hey, you know what, this job's going to get done and I'm going to help people and it's going to be me doing it. And it just brings so much satisfaction to your life.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
The first phrase would be don't sweat the small stuff. I'm a worrier by nature. I'm an entrepreneur, number one. So entrepreneurs are usually pretty big worriers. They're always trying to plan for tomorrow and avoid the obstacles that are coming. And we don't take enough time to smell the roses, my friend. And that, life is too short. I think you do need to have those qualities to plan ahead and avoid potholes, but also enjoy the ride, man.
Right. Don't sweat the small stuff and enjoy the ride. Awesome.
That's right.
It's been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. So, Luke Mickelson, your final question is this: how do you want your one sentence to read?
Wow, John, these are tough questions, man.
And it's early this morning in Idaho Falls. Take a big swig of coffee. Let's go to work, man.
Yeah, amen. I guess at the end of the day, I just want people to when you hear the word Luke Mickelson, I hope people just say, you know what, he did his best. He just did his best. Whatever it is, he just tried his best. I can't. One of my favorite characters of all time is Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, it's just a upgoing character that a coach. I kind of felt like I sat in a lot of his shoes, but he's a guy that was so uplifting and brought so much joy and looked at life in such a positive way. I'm learning that. I'm learning how to do that better for my wife. I'm learning how to do that better from the kids I get to serve. I hope people at the end of the day say, you know what, he just did his best. He's a good dude. He did his best and helped as many people as he could.
Lou Mickelson, I want to thank you for doing your best. I want to thank you for helping a group of scouts 12 years ago make a single bed. And then hearing a whisper that it mattered. So you did it again. And then you did it again. And then you did it again. And then you did it again. And you've done it again now more than 300,000 times with the help of others. I now recognize, along with CNN and all others who look up to you for the work that you do, the impact that you're having, and the truth that you remind us that the little things in life are not. So, my friends, you've been listening to the voice and the impact of my friend, now yours, Luke Mickelson. This is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Live inspired. Well, my friends, I have every feeling right now that you know why I was so emotional and excited to introduce our guest on the front side of this conversation. Luke Mickelson saw an opportunity a little bit more than a decade ago to make a difference for one, and in saying yes to that one, and then afterwards and asking the question, what more can I do? He has changed the life not only of a second one or a third one, but now more than 300,000 other children who formerly were bedless. Now they have a bed. And not only that in their families, but also those who put together those beds, those who delivered the beds, those who were part of that impact. You can be part of that as well. If you want to learn more about the work Luke does or how you can get engaged with it, why not join me right now online at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. I'll have a link in the show notes to how you can engage again with Luke's organization. And if you want to learn more about how to move your feet and engage with the struggle in front of you to make a difference right where you are, years ago, I interviewed a friend of mine named Bill McKendry. He's back at episode 430. Bill shared innumerable stories of how little things in life that we said yes to can make mighty differences. For Bill, one of the stories was saying yes to a conversation he had with a little woman named Mother Teresa. You're going to learn not just about that conversation, you're going to learn not just about ugly feet, but about what it means for him, for her, and ultimately for you. That's episode 430 with Bill McKendry, or just cruise over with me right now to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. I'll have a link in the show notes to that conversation. Well, friends, I want to thank you for getting splinters in your hand with me today. I want to thank you for believing, like I do, that the foundation is firm and that the best is yet to come. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift. Live inspired.